Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. So, I don't know about you, but Halloween is my favourite time of year. I discuss ghosts, witches, ghouls and monsters basically all year round, but Halloween is when they really get their time to shine. And also I seem a bit less weird for discussing them during this time of year. So today, we know Halloween as trick-or-treating or dressing up. But where did everything come from? Why do we dress up in scary costumes? Why do we give treats from door to door? Or why do we carve pumpkins? Well, over the next few videos, we'll be diving into the history of Halloween and exploring the little stories and the myths around its origin. So the original source of Halloween is Samhain, or Samhain, an ancient Gaelic festival marking the end of the harvest season at the beginning of the winter. The Celtic tradition of Samhain dates back over 2,500 years and was a celebration of the halfway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. Samhain would begin at dusk around October 31st and likely lasted 3 days. The celebration of the division between the year's lighter and the darker halves was celebrated throughout the ancient Celtic communities of Europe, including Ireland, Wales and Scotland, where I live. Samhain is a time when the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead is said to be at its thinnest, allowing for spirits to cross over it. It is also a time to remember the dead and to honour the ancestors. Samhain was the most significant of the 4 quarterly fire festivals among the ancient Celts, and early texts suggest that the holiday was mandatory, unless one wished to be punished by the gods and fall ill or, die. Additionally, anyone who committed a crime during the festival period would face a death sentence. Hearth fires in family homes were left to burn out whilst the harvest was gathered, and after the harvest work was complete, celebrants joined the Druid priests in lighting a community fire using a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. The wheel was considered to be a representation of the sun, and prayers were chanted as it spun. Like many ancient communities, animal sacrifices were made. Don't worry dogs, it was primarily cattle, and participants took a flame from the communal bonfire back to their homes to relight their hearths. Now, there are some texts which mention excessive alcohol consumption and overeating at gluttonous feasts as part of Samhain, as there's a suggestion that by reaching a certain food or alcohol threshold, one could communicate with the gods and ask them directly for healthy crops and good fortune. As for the dead, well, during this period, the dead could hear everyone who was alive speak, and they may even speak back to them. So, to appease their ancestors, families laid out what is known as dumb suppers as tribute. The word dumb in this case is a synonym for mute or silent, and as you can guess, the supper was one which occurred under complete silence. Celebrants consumed the food at the supper only after inviting ancestors to join them, and giving the families a chance to interact with the spirits until they left the following dinner. Afterwards, children would play games to entertain the dead, whilst adults would update the dead on, the past year's news. That night, doors and windows may be left open for the dead to come in and eat the cakes that had been left there for them. Now, because the barrier between the world of the living and the dead was thin during this period, the Celts prepared themselves for creatures breaching the realm. So offerings for fairies, known as shees, were prepared and left outside villages and fields, and the Celts protected themselves and their children from being kidnapped by the shees by dressing up as animals or monsters. Additionally, dressing up as a monster or animal was a useful tactic to avoid being recognised by a spirit of someone who you used to know before they died and they didn't like you very much, so you could avoid that interaction. Though we know of Samhain dating back over 2,500 years, there's evidence that the festivities date back much further. Between 1955 and 1959, Sean P. O'Riordan excavated and restored a mound in Tara, Ireland. Under the mound was a stone cairn covered by a clay mantle, which became known as the Mound of Hostages. The cairn produced the largest collection of burials and associated artefacts from any Irish Neolithic site, included the cremated remains of over 200 people, pendants, pottery, and the body of a 14-year-old boy. The mound is a chambered cairn or passage grave and was built during the mid-Neolithic around 3500 BCE, with a continual reuse throughout the Bronze period. Now, you're probably wondering, what has this got to do with Samhain? Well, the Samhain sunrise in early November illuminates the chamber of the mound of hostages, and the entrance to the mound aligns with the rising sun of Samhain. Now, considering this mound of hostages is around 4,500 to 5,000 years old, there's reason to believe that perhaps Samhain dates back that far as well. There were monsters and heroes of the Samhain festival. Each of the monsters deserves their own video, but we can discuss the strange adventure of one of the heroes, Nera. But before we get any further, I'd like to say a quick thank you to today's partner, which is Squarespace. I have built all of my main business websites over the past 2 years with Squarespace because I love how intuitive and easy it makes website design and layout. Look at my beautiful website. I absolutely adore blogging on there. It brings me so much joy. And, thank God for Squarespace because I don't know anything about coding. So when I used to blog back in the day, I would never understand how to get things to look exactly how I wanted them to. They weren't pretty, but with Squarespace, I just simply have to drag and drop my content where I want it, whether that's videos or words on the page, whatever that is. Squarespace makes it so easy. And if you're a creator like me who wants to expand your revenue stream, then Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that makes it easy for you to monetize your content and expertise in a way that fits your brand. So Squarespace member area lets you sell courses to your followers, or it even has an inbuilt email campaign where you can collect emails from the people that visit your website and you can send them updates about your courses or things that you're selling, etc. And the built-in analytics feature gives you insight into who's visiting your website, the traffic sources, where they've come from, the time they spend on your site, the most read content, and audience geography, and so much more, which helps you cater your, following either merch or maybe your courses to a particular geography. So say if most of my audience members are in America, then I can tailor my language or what I sell to fit the American audience, so forth. So if you want to expand your business or just build a beautiful website for your blogging leisure, then go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, then go to squarespace.com/lady of the library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video. And now let's get back into it. According to the story, the ancient Samhain night, King Ailill and Queen Maeve of Connacht gathered their entire household, including warriors, at their fort of Cuachran. As the men were feasting, Ailill made a strange request. One that sounded a bit more like a dare than anything else. You see, there had been 2 prisoners hanged just the day before. King Ailill declared that whoever went and placed a willow branch around the foot of one of the corpses hanging fresh from the gallows would get a prize. Now, no one wanted to approach the corpses as it was Samhain, and the dead were very much present in the realm of the living at this period. So according to their folklore, corpses could actually inflict harm on the living during Samhain. Yet, they were curious about the prize the king had to offer, so some men went off to face the challenge, but one by one, all of them returned, absolutely terrified by the darkness and the threat of the spirits. This is when Nera came forward. Donning a heavy suit of armour, Nera went to the house of torches where the 2 corpses were hanging. As Nera entered, his armour mysteriously fell off his body. Confused, he strapped himself up again, stepped forward, but then his armour fell off again. Nera picked up his armour, strapped himself up, and stepped forward. His armour fell off a 3rd time, but this time, he heard the cackling of laughter coming from the darkness in front of him. It was one of the corpses, and he was laughing. "You're doing it wrong." Nera listened to the deathly voice as it echoed through the darkness. "Your armour needs to be nailed on to stay on," the body told him. So Nera did as he was told. He fastened a nail to his armour and into his own flesh to hold it onto his body. Now note, in some versions of the story, it's actually the willow branch attached to the dead man's feet that comes off 3 times until it's pegged to the dead man's ankles rather than the armour. But we'll continue with this version of the tale. So impressed that he actually managed to nail his armour into his flesh, the corpse congratulated Nera before crying out, "By the truth of thy valour, take me on thy neck, that I may get a drink with thee. I was very thirsty when I was hanged." Nera agreed to take the dead man for a drink, so tossing his body over his shoulders, the two went to the nearest house. Upon arrival, they saw that a lake of fire actually surrounded the first house. Now I know what you're thinking, no, this story does not become a rescue mission as you might be expecting. Rather, the two rationalise that the people inside the house surrounded by fire would likely need to use all their water to damp out the flames before going to bed. So the pair left the flaming house and the people inside of it, and then went to the next one for a drink. Now, the next house was surrounded by a lake of water, but the corpse cried out, "Do not go in that house. There was never a washing nor bathing tub nor a slop pail in it at night after sleeping." Alright, picky, so they went to the third house instead, which seemed perfectly normal. The pair went inside and found the occupants had left out vats for bathing and washing without emptying them. Whilst the family slept, the dead man drank deeply from the vats. He then took his last mouthful, sprayed the water from his mouth all over the sleeping people in the house, and killed them all instantly. Now, interestingly enough, Nera was completely unfazed by this incident, and instead of helping the people or doing something with the dead bodies, he just left, taking the dead man back to the gallows. And that was when he found out he'd been tricked. I don't know why it took him this long, but you see, when he arrived, he saw the entire hill on which his fort sat was aflame, and resting in the foreground was a giant pile of heads, all belonging to his fellow soldiers. Dumbstruck, Nera noticed another army moving away, and he followed them as they sank deeper and deeper into the mound that they were marching on. That was when Nera realised that he was no longer on Earth. He'd entered a strange otherworld, one that bordered the realm of the living. Nera followed the army of Shis, watching in horror as they carried the heads of his fellow soldiers to their king. The king saw Nera and called him to approach, and gave him instructions to go on another quest. If Nera wanted to live, he would have to go to a woman's house and bring a piece of firewood to the king every day from that house. Well, naturally, not wanting to be beheaded, Nera went to the woman's house. When he arrived, the woman received him very cordially, and Nera faithfully brought the king back a bundle of wood every day. But then one day, Nera noticed a blind man with a physically disabled man on his back, leaving the palace and climbing over a wall. Bemused, he asked the woman what it meant. "They're going over to the crown that's in the wall," the woman explained. "It is a gold diadem that the king wears on his head, and that is where it is hidden." Confused, Nera asked why they went in twos. "Well, that's easy," the woman replied. "You see, the king would only trust a man who couldn't see and another man who couldn't walk to visit his most cherished possession, because neither of them could ever betray him." Now, in between the fetching of wood, the woman had become quite fond of Nera, and actually he was very fond of her too. He'd gotten her pregnant after all, so she decided to let him in on all the secrets of their land. She revealed that the fire and the mountain of severed heads that he had seen was actually a prophetic vision. It hadn't yet happened yet. You see, because Nera had entered a different realm, he was experiencing time differently, and all was not lost for him. His comrades were not dead. If he could travel back to his own realm, all his comrades would be saved if he could warn them about the Shi army that was about to attack them on Samhain. However, she added that he must send her a message before his people destroyed the army of Shis, so that she could escape this realm and come with him and their future son. And so Nera returned to the fortress to find everything was fine, and that his fellow soldiers were gathered around a cauldron, and the king and the queen were holding court. He received the gift from Aelil, which was a golden sword, and proceeded to regale them with all the adventures that he just experienced, finishing off with a dire warning that an army of shes was soon to attack them. And that is the weird origins of Samhain and the weird myth that goes alongside it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. There'll be more videos throughout the month of October. They'll be shorter, but hopefully you'll enjoy them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives, so keep reading.